Hi all, welcome aboard Marji B. In this video we step aboard Gentle Drift for an amazing cruise down the tidal Thames to St Catherine's Dock as a guest of the Thames Yacht Squadron, a group of intrepid mariners who use their Freeman cruises to the full every year. On the way we see all the sights of London and head out right past the Thames Barrier, and we were lucky enough to see the Queen's row barge Gloriana. But the biggest story of this trip is that as one door closed on us on the way downstream, the best ever door opened up for us further down. Something that the odds of happening were thousands to one. Wow. So we'd love it if you would join us on the journey and see the magic happen. The day started with Petra and I driving down to Teddington Lock to join the gathered fleet. Teddington marks the start of the tidal Thames, waters that I'd not experienced before bar a few drunken work riverboat discos back in the day. We'd been very kindly invited aboard Gentle Drift, a Freeman 28, by her custodian Ken to join him and his mum Joyce for the trip. The fleet was made up of us in Gentle Drift, Chris, Mick and James in Stravagan, Rupert in Minerva 2, Mark and Sue in Drumbeat, and Florin and his dashing co-pilot Sid in Lovely Lady. And as the lock gates opened to signal the start of our voyage downstream, I made a decision that was to shape Gentle Drift's passage more than I had expected. While capturing this drone footage was kind of worth the effort, landing back on a moving boat was trickier than I had expected, and you'll see just over my shoulder here the rest of the fleet disappearing off into the distance as we had to bring Gentle Drift to a halt for me to catch it on the bow. So while we could see the fleet ahead of us, they were still quite a way ahead of us, so we were always playing catch up. But notwithstanding that, we still very much enjoyed the cruise down through Richmond. But you can just see ahead of us there the rest of the fleet making their way through the arches of Richmond Half Lock with the sluices open. But what we didn't realise was that we were just on the cusp of those sluices closing, so as we approached, the red lights came on and we had to halt, knowing that we'd have to pass through the lock rather than straight through the arches unhindered. Richmond Half Lock, opened in 1894, is unique because it isn't a full lock system like Teddington. Instead, it's a half-tide lock and barrage designed to keep the river between Richmond and Teddington deep enough for navigation at low tide. Before it was built, the ebb tide would strip this reach almost dry, leaving boats stranded and restricting trade. The solution was a set of 3 massive vertical steel sluice gates, each weighing over 32 tons, which drop down at low tide to hold back the water and maintain a navigable depth. Unfortunately, on this occasion, my drone flying exploits had put us so far behind the fleet that it also held us back. And with it taking, 20 minutes, half an hour to get through the half lock, it put us maybe 2 miles behind the fleet. So we just relaxed and made our way gently downriver, separate from the fleet, but safe in the knowledge that we would find them later on downstream. So we didn't worry about catching up, we just enjoyed the sights and sounds of the journey down. And there were plenty to appreciate. This river is so rich in its history that you've just seen one site and another turns up, old and new. And as we made our way downstream, the boats coming the other way became bigger and added the jeopardy of dealing with their wash, which was quite fun, to be honest. You don't get that on the Upper Thames. And one thing that really struck me was so many of the bridges that cross the Thames, if you cross them in a car or a train, you don't get to see the wonderful architecture. But we did from the viewpoint of Gentle Drift. And as the excitement starts to build, there it is, Westminster just starting to peek through. I've seen it many times before, but never quite like this. That's the view everyone knows, Big Ben, but from here it feels brand new. And we left central London behind us and headed towards the city. And then the City of London came into view, a global financial hub and home to so many iconic modern buildings. But before we got to the city, there were more historical and cultural sites to see, like St Paul's and the Tate Modern Gallery, and even a recreation of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, which is actually open to the elements and performances go on no matter what the weather. And here comes the city, an area that I'm actually quite familiar with my day job, as I'm in the insurance and reinsurance industry, and I've had many a meeting in a lot of these buildings, and that one there, the Gherkin, was actually built by the company I worked for at the time, Swiss Re. I can vouch for the fact that the view from the piano bar at the very top is absolutely spectacular. And then what I'm sure is everyone's highlight as they make this journey comes into view. Tower Bridge, a quite spectacular piece of engineering. And I don't know if it's just me, but the hairs on the back of my neck are lifting just as I see this footage and do the commentary, because it was a magical moment to do this. But as you'll see in a moment, it wasn't just seeing it that was the magic. Something else happened that we absolutely could not have predicted that made this trip so special. And it was made even more special as Ken, knowing this was our first trip down the Thames, handed over the helm to me to take gentle drift under Tower Bridge. And how about this for a touch of royal treatment?
But that doesn't happen too often.
How lucky were we? You could do that 1,000 times and never have that happen, and that was our first. It may have been this Mississippi paddle steamer they opened it for, but I'm convinced it was for us. And with that excitement out of the way, we headed on downriver to meet up with the fleet. And the sights kept coming with Cutty Sark and Greenwich, and as we made our way round the Isle of Dogs and Canary Wharf, the O2 Arena came into view as well. And Ken not only treated me to taking the helm, he treated me to a nice cool glass of Butcombe beer as well. And coming up ahead is the Thames Barrier, an amazing feat of engineering and such an impressive and intimidating view from the water. It's hard to believe that these gates have been protecting London from flooding since the early 1980s, all quietly hidden under the surface until they're needed. Each of these silver towers hides a huge rotating gate and barrage underneath. They swing up to block tidal surges. And it wasn't long after we passed through that we met up with the rest of the fleet and then passed back up river through the Thames Barrier, which was just as impressive as the first time we came through. but this time we had a little bit of help from the tide pushing us back upriver. And it gave us the first opportunity in hours to have a little bit of fun as a flotilla together. The aim was to get to St Catherine's Dock, our destination for the night, at the point where the tide had rised high enough for them to open the lock gates. But we got there, I don't know, I think it was about 20 minutes, half an hour early, so we had to mill around downstream of Tower Bridge for the gates to open. But to be fair, there are plenty worse backdrops to mill around in front of waiting for a lock to open. But open it did, and we made our way through the lock to our moorings for the night. and I couldn't resist using our pontoon pass to sneak down for a closer look at Gloriana, as it seems like she's currently being kept there at St. Cat's Dock. You see photos of her and videos, but nothing prepares you for the craftsmanship, the gold leaf, the carving, the sheer presence. She's still officially the Queen's row barge, a legacy of the Diamond Jubilee, and honestly, she looks every bit as regal in person as you'd hope. We were so lucky to even see her, but even luckier to be able to have such a close look too. And so after heading out for dinner, we settled in for the night for some well-earned sleep. And as is apparent tradition when you're part of the TYS, you have a Wetherspoons breakfast, which we'd not been able to do by virtue of the fact of usually having Eddie and Parker with us. But we enjoyed one that morning and it set us up for the day. But obviously, arriving and leaving from St. Cat's is governed by the tide, and we either had to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning or around 6 o'clock in the evening. And we left at 6, I think it was 5:30 in the evening. We entered the lock as the water levels got to a point where we could leave. So we had a little bit of a race against time to get back up to Teddington before nightfall. But to be honest, we didn't actually rush at all. We enjoyed every moment of the trip back upstream. And here is the engineering of St. Cat's lock gates. I don't think it'll be unique, but it's very different in that the gates fold down rather than open side to side. So they disappear underneath you and you have to glide over the top of them on the way out. And the first sight to see was obviously again Tower Bridge, which was another amazing experience and made special again because with Ken's mum being with us, he asked her to take the helm as we headed underneath. Unfortunately, it didn't open for us again, but it was a magical moment nonetheless. And so we voyaged back upstream, past all the landmarks that we'd seen on the way down, under all of the amazing bridges that we'd passed under on the way down, and onwards to Teddington. But this time, Gentle Drift was part of the fleet proper. So we got a lovely opportunity to get some footage of the rest of the fleet heading upstream together. And before we get too close to Teddington, I must take this opportunity to thank all the guys in the Thames Yacht Squadron for inviting Petra and I along for this trip. We couldn't really have done it in Marji B for the time to get down there and back, but so much appreciated the invite to be aboard Gentle Drift from Ken and to join the gang who have been doing this for years together. It really was a wonderful experience, and one that both Petra and I will cherish for a very long time. And as we headed out of London and the sun dropped towards the horizon and the light faded, we made it back to Teddington just before darkness fell. It doesn't really show it here, but it was pretty dark at this point. The lights are all on, and while the rest of the gang moored up here for the night, Petra and I made a bit of a hasty exit, jumped in the car and headed home because we were picking up Eddie and Parker from their doggy daycare, and that was the best part of 2 hours away. So I think all that is left for me to say is thank you so much for joining us on our tidal trip down the Thames, and we will see you next time.